Hi, I'm Joe, and today I'll be discussing two theories of epistemic justification, foundationalism and coherentism. During the presentation, I'm going to advocate weak foundationalism as the best theory of epistemic justification. I'm going to begin by explaining foundationalism using examples, and I'll draw attention to its merits and its problems. I'm going to do the same for coherentism, and this will hopefully show that both theories are undeniably attractive in some ways, but they also face significant limitations. I'm then going to discuss a hybrid theory called foundationalism, as proposed by Susan Hark, and I'm going to contend that this improves significantly upon foundationalism and coherentism. I'm going to conclude, however, that on further examination, foundationalism is no more than a weak version of foundationalism. In other words, it's not as much of a middle way as Hark originally thought. And in doing this, I'll hopefully show that weak foundationalism is the best theory of epistemic justification. So, foundationalism is the view that all beliefs can be traced back to basic beliefs in a sort of one-directional chain. You've got basic beliefs which have a non-doxastic justification, meaning that their justification um, is based not on beliefs. So essentially, that's perception or introspection, that kind of thing. Whereas non-basic beliefs are doxastic, meaning they're justified on the basis of other beliefs. These are derived from basic beliefs. So, for example, the belief that David Eastwood is mortal can be shown to be derived from two other beliefs: the belief that David Eastwood is a person, and the belief that all people are mortal. We can see that David Eastwood is mortal is a non-basic belief, and it is doxastically justified because it's justified based on the basis of the other two beliefs. Another example makes the point nicely. This is the belief that there's a cup on the table. We can see that this belief is derived from perceptual experience rather than appeal to other beliefs. So foundationalism has a really nice intuitive appeal, and we can also see that we have more complicated beliefs that can be traced back to more simple beliefs, which is a nice framework for understanding how a justification works, but it still runs into two main problems. The first of these is debate over the characteristics and privileging of basic beliefs. And indeed, if basic beliefs really can be basic, it's hard to see how a belief owes zero justification to other beliefs without being just completely infallible. But this seems to reject experiential evidence as adequate for justifying basic beliefs. So in the case of perceiving there to be a cup on the table, well, we could just be in the grips of a hallucination. So if we widen our scope to include experiential evidence as part of basic beliefs, then we also run into problems. Bonjour proposed that we'll enter a regress from allowing these fallible basic beliefs. So, for instance, in the case of believing that there's a cup on the table, if I were really pressed on it, I'd probably end up saying something like, well, I believe that there's a cup on the table because my perceptions are usually reliable. And at that point, justification for my belief confers on another belief, rendering my original belief about the cup on the table non-basic. So foundationalism seems to have a hard time allowing truly basic beliefs while allowing room for experience. When it does include experience, it has a hard time avoiding regress. So what about coherentism? Well, this theory of epistemic justification posits that for a belief to be justified is for that belief to cohere with one's other beliefs. It's all about how nicely they fit together. So a nice example of this would be if three housemates walk in, the first carrying an umbrella, the second wearing a raincoat, and the third with wet hair. I may form the belief that it's raining outside. This belief coheres well with my other beliefs, and it in some sense seems to add an explanatory weight to the situation, like it all adds up now. It makes a lot more sense for me to believe that it's raining outside than it does for me to believe that it's dry outside, for example. And of course, this could all be wrong. My housemates could be tricking me, for instance, but my belief is still epistemically justified, right? It's just false and not knowledge. Similarly, I might hold the belief that there's a dinosaur in my room, but this doesn't cohere well with my other beliefs that dinosaurs are extinct and that my room's too small to host a dinosaur. So in this case, I'll probably notice that I'm holding some sort of false belief. Again, this has a really nice appeal to it, and it's nice seeing, like in the case of the housemates coming in from the rain, how the beliefs all fit together. It all seems to justify each other, but it still comes up short for two main reasons. The first is that it seems to pretty much entirely neglect experience from the epistemic justification. So in the case of believing that one of my housemates is wearing a raincoat, I can't believe this on the basis of perceptual experience. The coherentist would argue that this belief is epistemically justified because I hold because it coheres with my other beliefs. And this seems to be sort of implausible. I formed that belief on the basis of my perceptual evidence. And while it's true that holistic coherentists do accept a distinction between epistemic and psychological justification, epistemic being how you retrospectively justify it, and psychological being the actual processes that allow you to form the belief in the first place. So that would be your perception here. While it's true that these guys do advocate this distinction, the emphasis is very much on the role of doxastic justification. And from this point, coherentism is suspect to circularity, right? So if all beliefs are only justified in reference to other beliefs, then which belief begins the justification? It seems to be that each belief kind of confers justification upon itself, and we end up in this vicious cycle where no one belief begins the chain. So we've essentially got coherentism, which neglects experiential evidence, which invites circularity but mitigates a regress, and foundationalism, which, if we allow experiential evidence, allows it to avoid circularity but invites a regress. So where do we go from here? Well, this was a question on Susan Hark's mind before she introduced her theory of epistemic justification called foundationalism. This is a hybrid model utilising the merits of foundationalism and coherentism while avoiding the problems that each theory raises. Hark uses a crossword puzzle as an analogy for foundationalism. The clues to the crossword are akin to our experiential evidence, our perceptual evidence, and the filled-in entries are an analogue for our supporting beliefs. These collectively form the evidence for our belief. So when we solve clues in a crossword, we tackle both the clue directly and we fit it in with our other answers. Every answer is entirely contingent upon every other answer in the crossword. So for instance, 3 across here is entirely based on our answers to 1 down and 2 down, and indirectly based on our answer to 4 across, since 1 down confers on 4 across. So we might think we know the answer to the clue. In this case, it's Nicola, as in Nicola Sturgeon. But we might not be completely sure. We might, for example, not know much about Scottish politics, or just not remember when we're answering the crossword. And so it's only when we look to see our other filled-in entries that we can be totally sure that our answer is correct. And we also need to see that our solution is superior to its competitors. It makes more sense for the answer to be Nicola than Olivia, for example. We can liken this to our earlier example with the housemates walking in from the rain. They walk in with an umbrella, raincoat and wet hair. This renders the proposition that it's raining outside superior in terms of epistemic consistency to the proposition that it's dry outside. It just makes more sense that way. And equally, while our belief may be generated entirely from experience, as in the generation of the belief, so the perceptual evidence, for example, it's only truly justified by appeal to coherence of its other mutually supporting beliefs. The point is that for a belief to be justified, the evidence takes from both experience and coherence. Evidence is both non-doxastic and doxastic. So belief is justified according to foundationalism if it's based on good evidence, good independent security, and good comprehensiveness. We've spoken a bit about evidence already. So independent security denotes the strength of confidence we have in each of the beliefs separately, each crossword entry in itself. It's no good if the only reason we believe in 1 down is based on 4 across, but the only reason we believe on 4 across is because of 1 down. We end up in this sort of circular state that coherentism has given us. So we want our beliefs to have a high degree of independent security to avoid this. Comprehensiveness is a little harder to spell out. Hark admits this herself. I think she means something like total usage of the evidence provided, so we can identify a justification that's uncomprehensive if it neglects to consider both experiential evidence and supporting beliefs in its justification. So foundationalism, hopefully anyway, is clearly a major improvement upon the theories of foundationalism and coherentism. We've already spoken about how independent security overcomes the coherentist problem of circularity, and it should be clear that we also successfully incorporate experiential evidence as an important contributor to the epistemic justification. We can appeal to perceptual evidence for some of our beliefs without finding ourselves in the implausible scenarios, such as believing there's a cup on the table because I normally have a cup on the table because there's liquid in my stomach. I believe it because I can see it, right? So we managed to avoid this problem. And we can also overcome the problems of foundationalism. So, firstly, Founderianism overcomes the ambiguity surrounding basic beliefs. We maintain that there's a role of experience while allowing justification to come from appeal to other beliefs. There's no entry in the crossword that doesn't depend upon the other entries, even if we generate the entry without thinking about the others. So, for example, I believe there's a cup on the table due to my perceptual evidence, yet it is justified because of both my perceptions and the fact it fits with my other beliefs. And this allows us to avoid the problem that I could just be hallucinating, which was seen to happen when we allow fallible basic beliefs before. And it also means that we overcome the meta-belief objection. So appealing to coherence with other belief fills in the gap that Bonjour initially filled in with meta-beliefs, such as that our perceptions are reliable. This means that we won't get caught in this sort of chain that, I think there's a cup on the table because my perceptions are usually right, because on this occasion they were usually right, because on this occasion they were usually right. We could go on forever there. The point is that the coherence fills in the gap that the meta-beliefs and the regress fill instead. Yet, while Founderianism goes some way to overcoming the classic objections made against foundationalism and coherentism, the work of Bonjour and Tromel, who we'll get onto in a second, have shown that Hark firstly underestimates foundationalism and secondly overestimates Founderianism as a distinct middle way, demonstrating that Founderianism is no more than a weak version of foundationalism. That is to say, it's not as much of a 50-50 split between foundationalism and coherentism as Hark implies. So Tromel took Bonjour's objections and ran with them, demonstrating that Hark had characterised foundationalism too strongly. So Hark's conception of foundationalism was that basic beliefs are justified independently of other beliefs, and this could be taken to mean one of two things, right? So firstly, it could mean that basic beliefs owe no justification at all to other beliefs. They're entirely non-doxastic, and that's what Hark intended. Or this kind of weaker reading that Tromel's going to advocate, which is that basic beliefs have some justification that doesn't owe to other beliefs. So they're partially doxastic as well as partially non-doxastic. He calls this the cosmopolitan reading of foundationalism, and this essentially broadens the scope of foundationalist basic beliefs. Means that basic beliefs owe some of their justification not to other beliefs, as well as some of their justification to other beliefs, such as through appealing to coherence. And alongside the principle that all justification is ultimately the product of basic beliefs, i.e. non-basic beliefs are always derived from basic beliefs, which is again compatible with Hark's Founderianism, we can see that Founderianism is actually a foundationalism, just a slightly weaker version than what's normally cast as foundationalism. Tromel goes on to describe Hark's foundationalism as non-feeble, and his version of foundationalism as feeble. We're going to keep referring to it as weak. But we can see that Hark's Founderianism, Hark supposed that her Founderianist model would take far more influence from coherentism than any foundationalist would allow. And what we can see is that this idea was based entirely on her own prejudice against foundationalism in the first place. So we can conclude, therefore, that the best model of epistemic justification is weak foundationalism, because it brings together the merits of both stricter versions of foundationalism and coherentism. We've hopefully shown that Founderianism isn't just a 50-50 midpoint between the two. It's actually more foundationalist than coherentist, therefore we're categorising it as weak foundationalism. Coherentism doesn't allow experience for its epistemic justification, even if it can for psychological justification, whereas foundationalism can allow coherence of other beliefs to be part of the basic belief within foundationalism, while maintaining integrity as a foundationalist theory. It's not enough to say that it's merely a case of where you draw the line and that Founderianism and weak foundationalism are saying the same thing, because while they're making similar points and solving similar problems, it's demonstrating that foundationalism just has far more scope than coherentism does. Therefore, it's not like this even middle way. But I hope as well that this has demonstrated the importance of discussing Founderianism before arriving at this conclusion. It feels important to bring in Founderianism instead of jumping straight to, well, weak foundationalism could work, because it allows us to illuminate the problems of stricter theories and show how the logical challenges of regress and circularity can be overcome. Overall, weak foundationalism hopefully have shown is the best theory of epistemic justification. Here are my references, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks very much.